Why does everyone hate Zenless Zone Zero? I know why some people have got issues with it, and I definitely think some of the issues that some people have got are valid AF. But let's see what you got to say then, shall we? Why does everyone hate Zenless Zone Zero?
My problem with
I want to get Cleader as well. I need another stun character because at the moment they're the most important characters in the game. There's not really much need to build teams in this game, I will say, at the moment. But having a good stun character is great to have. So I'd like to get Cleader.
with Zenless Zone Zero, after thinking about it, was that I feel like the game was not represented to be what it was going to be. Most of my problems, to be real.
Personally, I disagree with that. Just from the point of view, and obviously this is subjective because this is what I took the advertisement as. At the end of the day, everybody perceives things differently, so I can't say people have saw something different to what I did. And I must admit, I didn't watch all of the promotional material. The stuff that I did see, though, was kind of advertised the way the game is, in my opinion. I thought it was going to be this smaller, more contained game that was small instance dungeons, combat sections, with a little hub world, and it being a bit more roguelike. I knew it was going to be a lot more like Snowbreak and Solo Leveling Arise. A lot of people keep comparing it to Genshin and Honkai and Wuthering Waves, and it makes sense to compare it to the other HoYo games. And it kind of makes sense to compare it to Wuthering because it's just launched, but it's really not like those games at all. I'd say it is a lot more like PGR, Solo Leveling Arise, and Snowbreak. And I'd say probably out of all three of those, it holds up against all of those, if I'm honest. I think it's supposed to be that third game to keep people in the HoYo ecosystem, in my opinion.
With you are fully related to the live stream, like the release live stream. The release
Didn't watch that, so it's a fair point. Can't really say anything about that.
live stream had three things that I feel were entirely not accurate, misrepresented, or
Okay.
like just a straight up lie. So I'm gonna tell you what those three things are.
Curious about that. Didn't watch the live stream. I did watch a video of somebody kind of recapping the live stream, and I didn't get any of that from me. But obviously, I was hearing that through the grapevine from a third party, so let's see what she's got to say.
Subscribe. The first one is that the game advertised there being 180 free pulls, and they did this whole insane
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
show about like Dawei going,
That's
20
fair.
extra pulls for the players. You get a pull. You get a pull. Look at our insane generosity. But really,
I think a lot of that, though, was a little bit of a to combat what's been going on with Wuthering, with how generous Kuro have been, you know?
the reality of the situation is like, yeah, you do get 180 free pulls. The vast majority
It's not
of
characters,
them
though.
you get purely from grinding the game. Very few of those pulls were actually quote unquote free pulls unless you don't value your own time. Having to spend your time on the game to get those pulls does not make them free, even though you didn't have to you didn't
No, I disagree with that. I think it was probably worded incorrectly. I wouldn't say that's straight up a lie, though, because it's still free. It might be costing you your time, but it is still free. When I heard that, I was just like, they're not just going to give us straight up 180 pulls off the bat that we're just going to be able to roll on characters, are they? Surely not.
have to spend money, I guess, but your time is value too, especially in
That's true.
gacha. So I did not like that it was not abundantly clear where you were getting those pulls. Also, almost all of them were for
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. That was true. They didn't make it clear that it was going to be through gameplay from what I saw. Still do see it as free, though, personally. But that she makes a good point there.
the standard banner or for the bongboos, which aren't even pulls that you can spend money on. I don't believe. I don't think you can buy bongboo pulls if I remember correctly. That's just something you grind for. So it just gave you extra bongboos essentially. I didn't like that it wasn't made clear where you get those pulls from. Do I think that they should have just let us log on and bust out 180 pulls instantly? No, but it would have been nice if
Some people did, though. I definitely think some people did. But it was obvious that was never going to be the case. It just wasn't going to happen.
they didn't call it you know, advertise it that way when that's kind of what it seemed like we were gonna do. The second thing,
I do think that's a little bit on the gamer though as well, in just assuming. But I agree that it was probably, I don't want to say worded badly, but not clearly, you know, clearly shared and you know, the information given fully and transparently. But yeah.
thing that I didn't particularly like about the game, or I didn't like about the advertising or how the game was sort of put in front of you, they did not really address the TV situation in the live stream, right? They sort of very specifically didn't show any TV gameplay, anything like that. They didn't address what they were going to be doing in the future with the TVs. Like, there was no detailed information about the TV.
I think that might be down to because they don't necessarily know what to do with the TV system in the future. I think because they've created it as a storytelling vehicle, that they've got to, if they're going to remove it as that, they've got to come up with some other way to allow the player to be doing something while doing story beats. Because I was saying before in the previous video that in a lot of story-based games, when they want to give you a little bit of either an exposition dump, a bit of a expansion on the lore or characters or motivations or what's going on, you usually have a bit of a lull in the action, don't you? If it's a story game where you might go from having a bunch of action to traversing from point A to B with a little bit of light mechanics just to allow you to take in the story, but it's applied contextually to what's kind of going on, you know, characters going back and forth with each other as you're doing something and you're traversing from point A to B, and it makes sense. But the TV system has been used in the campaign for that, but it's a bit of a distraction and it's quite abstract, so you kind of switch off from what the characters are talking about and what you're doing, because it like I say, it's abstract. When you're doing the things, it doesn't really feel like you're doing those things because you're just moving from screen to screen and, you know, doing these really abstract mechanics. But I do like the TV system. I just think it's bad for being a storytelling mechanic. So I think they're going to be having to think that through. If they remove it as that, how are they going to implement that story mechanic and have you doing something? Is it going to be some other abstract system, or are they going to create bigger areas where you go from point A to B and there's some very small exploration in a linear sense, and there's some, you know, chests to pick up here and there as the characters are like talking to each other? Because that will take quite a bit of work. You know, it's going to be a lot more gameplay and level design added. So probably will take a little bit of time. So I can understand them maybe not going in on that, because I don't think they've probably figured out what they're going to do.
TVs, and I think the reality of that is because the second that they saw TVs in the live stream, people would have been like, "Oh my fucking god, they're still fucking there." Because
see, I like the TV system, especially in the HoYoverse and for in-game stuff. I think it can work really well. It just needs to be used right.
People have hated those TVs since the first beta test. They despise them, and so I think they left them out of the dev live stream to make it seem like they're not there or not that big of a deal, so people could have more hype. Because the second people saw them, they would have been fucking mad about it. And then when you get into the game, it's like so much TVs. Especially the beginning of the game is the first 5 hours of the game.
It's because it's really used as a, like I said, as a vehicle to tell the story. It's literally you going from point A to B. So that's why it's used a lot at the start, because it's giving you story. You're going from a combat scenario to another combat scenario. So it's the way of telling the story in that sense. But as I said, it's kind of distracting for a storytelling element because it's so abstract. But the system, I like it, man. I like it.
Is a crazy amount of TV gameplay, considering that they didn't acknowledge that there was so much.
The TV system is unique, not going to lie, but I'd rather choose to walk to stage because it's more good. I can see my character more often by that. Agree. And I think this is why it's probably going to take a while for them to implement something like that if they decide to do that.
Of it, and considering the fact that in 3 beta tests, people hated them and they didn't take them out completely. And then the third thing for me is just simply this line about it being a combat-focused gameplay, because when you say something, it should be true. And
that's true. The combat does serve as quite a... It's not even like a secondary element to the game. It's kind of like a tertiary element at the moment, isn't it? You've got the story seems to be the forefront. and then the TV system with the hub exploration, and then the combat. And this is why I say, once again, that the TV element is not a bad system, but it's applied incorrectly because it makes the combat seem even smaller. It seems like you're doing less of it because you're doing more of these other mechanics as you're going through the story.
Reality is maybe it is once you finish all of the early game stuff and you get all the way into the end game, and maybe when the game has been developed for a while, yes, you're going to be doing a lot of combat. And so at the end of the day, eventually, maybe it's a combat focused game. But the vast majority of people played this shit and were like, all I'm doing is playing fucking TVs. How is this a combat focused game? And
it's a fair point as well. I've seen a lot of people say that they've uninstalled the game within an hour or two. And at the end of the day, it's a game's duty to grab you. You shouldn't have to spend a set amount of hours before you really get to what you're going to be doing and the enjoyable part of the game as well. So it's definitely a fair point.
I think that was actually a really reasonable feeling. Yeah, to come into it and have all of these things be like not entirely represented or not entirely like truthful in the release of the live stream. Like that feels like
first impression.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the hardest thing about the game, the biggest focus of the game is your patience. That's the demon you're fighting at the beginning of this game. I think that most of people's...
That's true. I said this myself yesterday. The game is meandering at the start. Like for me, Wuthering Waves kind of started okay. Not for everybody. The very start was good. Then it became really meandering, slow, a bit of a slog, so much waffle. And then towards the end to the Threnodian got really good. And then 1.1 was great. This has started off. It's probably got a bit more of a bit more interesting for me, the premise and the characters, or the gameplay element is incredibly slow at the start, incredibly. And I'd like to say again, the TV system exacerbates that in the way it's used.
Experience and most of people's negative feeling toward the game, personally also my own, is the fact that ultimately it felt like it was going to be one thing and it wasn't that thing. And then people were mad because people already sort of have like kind of a negative tilt to HoYo. And yeah, you could bring up HSR or whatever the fuck else, right? But the reality is a lot of people don't really trust HoYoverse. They don't trust HoYoverse to listen to players all of the time. A lot of people have felt very deeply burned by HoYoverse. And so
it doesn't help that there's been massive amount of dick riders for HoYoverse for a while. That I think they felt a little bit invincible in that sense. And people have also got to accept when it comes to gacha games, and especially HoYoverse games, massive amount of the player base is in China. So sometimes Western audiences' views kind of just ignored. They don't matter because China sometimes can make more money than the global market altogether. I think one thing though, I think in North America, Zenless Zone Zero has actually had more downloads. I could be wrong and that might change, but I think as of now, NA has got more downloads of this game.
I see. Okay, so you didn't really give us those rewards.
That could be a good thing for the West,
maybe. You weren't really honest about what the type of gameplay was of this game, and you didn't listen to community feedback about how much people hated the TV gameplay, despite the fact that was something that people were upset about since quite literally CBT1. Like
from what I've heard, though, didn't play any of the beta tests, but it has been streamlined massively from what I've heard from people.
Like a year ago, like so long ass time ago. And so like there people already don't trust HoYoverse, and then it felt like, okay, so this is exactly what I expect from untrustworthy HoYoverse. I don't want to play it then. And I think that is absolutely and 100% a legitimate reaction from a consumer if they don't trust the corporation, that if they immediately feel that they are validated and not trusting that corporation, that they don't want to continue trying it and that they're just going to shit on it. And so I don't think it's a consumer's responsibility to continue trying. I'm glad that I have, because once I understand better what the actual game is and not what HoYoverse lied about, it is actually pretty enjoyable.
I think that's a little bit harsh to say they lied about it. As I said, I didn't consume all of the promotional material, but I never got that vibe that it was going to be something different than what we've actually got. This is what it is kind of what I thought it was going to be. I will admit, I thought the combat would, at the start, be a bit more front and center, but it's going to be later on, and it's fair that people are annoyed that it wasn't. Totally valid criticism. But I don't know, I don't necessarily feel like they lied in that regard. They even stated, not long before it came out, that this would be a game that people could kind of appreciating small doses and then come back and go away and come back. And so maybe she's seen stuff that I just didn't see though, you know?
If you go into this with the experience, with expecting the experience of a brain rot gacha game with nice music and cool animations and interesting character designs and a lot of refreshing shit, right? I think this could be a game for you. But if you're going into it expecting what you thought you were going to get from the fucking game, you're not going to enjoy it. And that is...
To be fair though, that's kind of what I expected. I kind of expected it to be, you know, a very simple brain rot kind of gacha game, really. Because to be fair, in my opinion, Star Rail and Genshin are kind of that. And that's not saying that I don't absolutely love Star Rail. I think it's great. But I think they are a little bit more... Now, I am a Wuthering Waves Andy, but I just feel like you've got to be a little bit more focused and involved with that game than you have with the others. It's more about the story and pulling the right characters really in the other HoYo games, if I'm honest.
It's HoYoverse's fault. I don't think it matters. I don't think
games.
it should matters. Because, like, I don't think you should have to play through X amount of hours in order to enjoy the game. I'm going to continue to try it because I do genuinely want to understand, because I've said over and over again how much I want to like the game. And I get paid to play the game, so it's fine. It's not me losing out on my time. But I don't think anybody in this chat needs to continue giving the game space or time or hope if you don't like it. But you can watch me and maybe I decide later.
That's totally fair as well. I hate the argument that some people make when they're like, just give it time, it gets good. It's like a lot of people do this with MMOs and some RPGs as well. They're like, dude, just, you know, get to 20, 30 hours, maybe even 100. It's all about the end game. It's like, yeah, that's fair, but the game shouldn't get good at the end game. It should be good before that. Now, like I say, I'm enjoying it. That's totally fair.
Later that you do like it. I think this game has a lot of problems really early on that makes it feel like ass. For me, when I had a paradigm shift, I sat down and I had me a paradigm shift. I decided, okay, I'm going to go into this with the same expectations that I had for Cookie Run Kingdom. I'm going into this with the expectations that I had with Cookie Run Kingdom because I adored that game, but nobody's gonna sit here and talk like and expect anything all that special from Cookie.
Well, she just said that she was going in with expecting it to be something else, didn't she? Because I lied. I don't really get that point.
Run Kingdom gameplay. The point of this game is that I get to look at cool animations and characters, have cool music, fun vibe, and do a little bit of fighting here and there, and let's see how it feels if I play the game with those expectations and not the ones that HoYoverse gave me by sort of lying. And I find it a lot more enjoyable. Do I think it's perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This game has a lot of problems, and I do not blame...
I've said it multiple times. If I had to, I'm not really a big fan of giving scores out of 10, but if I had to, I'd probably give it a 6. You know, I'll give it a 6 at the moment. Visually, gorgeous. Animations, top tier. Music, great. Voice acting, brilliant. I like the premise. I like the setting. I like the art style. The combat's simple and quite... you can go on autopilot when you're playing it. It's got the potential to have some difficulty, and I think to be more complex later on. But it's fun, and it's really flashy, and it looks good. And so far, I'm kind of enjoying the story as well. And I do not dislike the TV system as well. And I'm enjoying the characters. I like the character design. I think I love how much the characters are give expressions in cutscenes and stuff. They're so expressive. So, but yeah, I think I'll give it a 6.
A single person who doesn't want to play it or doesn't like it. Really. I think the game is mid as shit. I think the game is super mega mid, and if you don't like it and you don't want that brain rot, I don't think you should play it. It's mid, but that doesn't mean that like it's not worth playing in any way, shape, or form. I think that sometimes mid is kind of what you need because you don't necessarily want every gacha game you play to be something that you really have to put time and effort into. You don't want to...
I think that's purposely... I think the game is kind of purposely designed like that myself anyway. I think I've said this multiple times. If you play all 3 of HoYoverse's flagship games at the moment, this, Genshin, and Honkai, that'll mean that there'll be a major update every other week for you. I think this game has been designed to keep you within the HoYo ecosystem. So when you're having a break off Genshin or Honkai, you come over, you play this, you maybe play it on your phone, you do it while you're commuting, while you're chilling, or you just, you know, it's your 3rd game to play potentially, and it's kind of just switch off, relax, just go through the motions. I genuinely believe what that game, well, this is what that game is designed to be. And that's why I think the way the combat works, because it's action combat, but it's been designed in a way that it kind of links towards Honkai's combat, Star Rail's combat in a way that it's almost, I don't want to say that it's turn-based, but the way the switch system works and that you don't really have to do too much other than attack and a switch assist, it kind of fills that medium gap in between action combat and turn-based combat quite well as well. When you think about it like that, it's designed quite well to be that. And I think that's what it's for. I think that's what the suits at HoYo want from it, really.
To play like 4 gacha games that require much of your time or effort or energy.
Yeah,
Maybe
dude, the
you
music
just want
is
a
fire.
gacha game where you can kind of brain rot and not try that hard and not think that much about it. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, totally
Because
fine.
we're thinking about gacha gamers, right? If this is a game for gacha gamers, I actually think it's really good. But I don't.
Let's face it, as gacha gamers, we've all got mental issues. That's why we're playing these games. So, you know, for one of them or multiple of them to be kind of, you know, simple switch off games, totally fine, man.
think that anyone should continue to try it if they don't immediately like it. I think that they were dishonest in the way that they initially chose to market the game. And if you're mad about that, you should be. You're not realistically
agree with
expecting
that
anything
personally,
that
though.
insane from most gacha gameplay. But this is definitely a game that is not for everyone. It's definitely not going to be
That's
for
true.
people who want more game
No game is for everybody, but, you know.
out of their gacha. And I think that HoYo could have done more with this, and they didn't. I think that this is way too mid for a game by HoYoverse, okay? In terms of gameplay. I think that this game should have been more than it was. But I think also if you're a degenerate gacha player who doesn't really care that much about it being a good game and you just want a fun gacha game, you will get what you paid for, which is free. I think it's not so much that my views have changed on the game. It's more so that my perspective has. I think there's a really big difference between the game
Playing a game will allow you to change your perspective, though. You know, time, as you advance through it, it's going to change your perspective, totally.
and the expectations by the community before and after Genshin Impact. And I'm saying that thinking that Genshin Impact is kind of a poopy-doopy game that I generally resent and don't like very much, okay? But it did
Also, when she's talking as well about, especially in terms of the combat, it not being great for HoYo, I haven't played Impact 3rd, but for me personally, I think the combat in Genshin is the weakest part of Genshin. It's quite meandering. It's not really skill-based. It's all about your elemental, whatever it is, synergy. It's about the world and the RPG elements for me with that game. And the waifus, it really is. Wuthering Waves kind of took it to the next step where combat-wise, it's fucking sick. The other elements maybe a little bit weaker on. I love the world. I love the traversal, the getting around the world, which is poor in Genshin as well, in my opinion. It's a chore to get about Genshin's world, in my opinion. It really is. I think Star Rail is the best HoYoverse game, and that's turn-based combat, which is all about the right characters and the right abilities and setting your team up right. Which I think Star Rail is starting to lean a little bit too much into having the right characters as well. But, you know, I think combat-wise, I don't think HoYo are the masters at that. If you compare it to something like Wuthering Waves, to me, that's the gold standard of action combat in the gacha space. By far. Absolutely by far.
sort of changed the game for gacha, and I think HSR did a good job of giving people more of what they wanted and expected from gacha games, because while it is turn-based and imperfect and not everyone's cup of tea, for a turn-based game, I think they did fantastic. I think that this was a game that would have been...
It's just a straight-up JRPG, turn-based JRPG with a gacha system. That's what it is, and he does a good job of being that as well.
An absolute smash hit in like 2019. In 2019, I think that this would have been the gacha game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The one, the best one.
I agree with
there
that.
would not have been a
Facts.
competitor for this game in 2019 or early 2020. This would have been the game. The problem is that the expectations have been raised.
I also think Genshin suffered a little with that. It was the COVID game. It came out at the perfect time. Now, not saying that Genshin wouldn't have been massive, and I like Genshin. I rag on Genshin a lot, but I like it. But I do think if it had come out a year later, 2 years later, would never have been anywhere near as big as what it was. It was the COVID buff for sure.
This is a gacha game in the truest sense of what gacha usually is. But after Genshin and Wuwa and all these other things, this is going to be a disappointment, especially from HoYoverse.
Thank you for your patience.
I think people would generally be very impressed with this game if it came from another developer as well. But
I said this about Wuthering Waves. That Wuthering Waves is going to make people, in terms of action combat, look at every game that comes out after it with a bit of cynicism because of how good the action combat is in Wuthering Waves, in my opinion. That I knew that I was, because obviously being an action game, I was like, I just don't think the combat's going to live up to it. Now, granted, the combat's super simple in this, but I don't think even if it had a little bit of extra complexity, I still think it would have I would have had that bias because of just how good Wuthering Waves combat is.
because it's HoYoverse, it feels like ass. The bar has been raised multiple times at this point, and it does not hit that bar. I think that if you're somebody who has played games outside of Genshin and HSR and Wuwa, I think this is going to appeal to you much more effectively because you understand the base excitement of gacha games. Where I think a lot of people got into gacha because it was like more like a real game plus the gacha stuff. If it was marketed correctly, I think people would hate it less. I think people would.
That's a good point, because I definitely do think Star Rail, Genshin, and Wuthering are more like traditional games with the gacha system tacked on, where other gacha games tend to be the gacha system with a game built around it, which this is kind of like that, really, isn't it? This feels more like a story with a bit of gameplay tacked on and a gacha system as well. It doesn't feel like the gacha system's like the forefront of this game, personally. At the moment, anyway. It feels like the story's the main thing they're trying to get across, but I think they're just doing it in a poor way regarding to the gameplay loop and the TV system, which we spoke about earlier.
Still probably not like it that much or be disappointed by it. But I think people would be less like, oh my God, this is the worst fucking game that's ever fucking existed. And I understand it, you know? If they had marketed it as it was, I think people would actually probably generally like the game more and they would feel less specifically angry and upset about it. But the fact is...
What part of the marketing did I miss? Because I've said this before. I ain't going to rag on it too much because, as I said, Hex has probably seen a lot more of it than me. But I never got that. And perception is key, of course. It's what I perceive. But I never felt like that they were advertising it to be something other than what it is, personally. But as I said, I might be missing something.
That they didn't do that. And so people don't owe corporations the space of... continuing to try something when they feel that they've been disappointed. But yeah, I do think
too many people deployed HoYo for
and
one.
having better rewards would have also helped because after Wuwa, it's just kind of not acceptable. The long and short of this game is that this game...
Again, man, Wutherings give us so much quality that games following it are always going to have, even if it's not just about the combat, it's just about the entirety of the game altogether. It's just going to be like, yeah, but like, you know, Wuthering gave us all of this.
Is a gacha game, full stop. It's a gacha game in the purest and most classical like sense of being a gacha game. And so those people who want more from gacha games than just gacha game shit aren't gonna like it that much. Like they're just not.
That's a fair point.
If you're somebody who came into
disagree with
because of because of Genshin and because Genshin was closer to like regular games, you know, no. You're absolutely in no way ever going to enjoy this game. There's just no way for you to be honest. Because if you've never played like other gachas outside of sort of the HoYoverse standard and Wuwa, you're not going to like this game. It's going to be hard for you, but if you were somebody who played like other like Arknights, Fate Go, Honkai Impact Third even. Any older, more like classic gachas before Genshin, PGR even to a certain extent, yes.
I genuinely think if you enjoy Snowbreak and you enjoy Solo Leveling Arise, think you'll enjoy this.
PGR might be hard because it's just going to be kind of like worse PGR for a lot of people. But it's like, it's the older style of a gacha game with all of the modern niceties and visuals and
That's valid.
Technology.
That's a good point.
And so if you played gacha games before Genshin, I think you'll like this game. If you didn't play gacha games before Genshin, I don't think you're going to like this game. So that's kind of the take.
I think as well, a lot of people who predominantly play Genshin and like Genshin as a game might not enjoy this anyway, because Genshin is just straight up an open world action RPG. It's kind of like Breath of the Wild, isn't it? You know? It's the same way as if you like Honkai, Star Rail that is, even though I say that there is that crossover potential for this, it depends if you like the gacha space more, but Honkai is just a good turn-based JRPG. So if you like JRPGs, you're going to like it. I do agree that if you're more of a traditional action game player and you like this sort of combat, it might not be for you because it's very condensed and the systems are not exactly designed how most people would expect, of just flowing missions, going from area to area, doing your thing, getting involved in the combat. So that is definitely a fair point. It is really a gacha games game, really. And if you're in the space, you'll probably like it.
That I've overthinking about it, and
you'll understand it
playing
more, should I say?
Off stream,
because there's lots of people in the space that hate it. So,
and playing it now, and just in general, I think ultimately the appeal of this game is like classic hardcore gacha players, which is why I think that there's more of a degen focus to some of the character designs. It is what it is, and so I think that this is a gacha game for gacha players. For gacha players, like not Genshin players, not even necessarily HSR players or Wuwa players, you know? I think that this is a gacha game for gacha players. For gacha players who play gacha games that are dog shit. Because the reality is that gacha games are pretty ass. Especially
they are for people with mental health conditions. I think that's why I like them, you know?
Classic gacha games
mentally ill teenage girls.
It's like mobile only gacha games for gacha reasons are ass. That's what this is for. This is that, but nice and shiny and pretty and good. Like the reality is like a lot of people really, really, really do genuinely enjoy classic gacha stuff. Like classic gacha, Honkai Impact, PGR, Fate Go. Those games had a huge ability to make money and a huge amount of success long before Genshin Impact existed. Gacha games existed before Genshin. I know that this is shocking. My first gacha game, by the way, was Fate Go. But like gacha games existed long before Genshin Impact. This is for those players, in my opinion. And I could be totally wrong. Totally wrong about their intention there. And that's totally fine. And people can disagree.
I think I do disagree on it's not so much on the intention. The intention to make money, of course, is there. That's why these games have these systems. End of the day, gacha games have predatory systems. They want you to get into the FOMO. They want you to spend. That's why they have all these. They know exactly what they're doing. They know what they're doing. But I don't know if the intention was for this to be specifically that. Because I think I disagree on some points. That I don't think this game is trash, straight up just trash gacha game. But at the same time, I kind of do, because there's not that you can't really argue it from the sense of the gameplay loop, which I just think, personally, I think that's kind of like that at the minute, because the way they want to tell the story, and maybe the gameplay will become more front and center. But then at the same time, the way the instances work, there's no denying that it is very, very small vertical slices of gameplay that don't lend itself to being this more over-encompassing game with a system of gacha added to it. It definitely does feel like it makes the gacha system feel like a larger part of the game, and the TV system feel like a larger part of the game, because the gameplay loop's really quite small. And like I said, again, I think it's the way they're telling the story that really doesn't help that. It kind of exacerbates all those negative elements. Whereas if it was more just the end game systems and optional systems, a TV system, and they did a different way to tell the story, which hopefully they will in future updates and give you, you know, more level design to move from A to B, from combat here to combat there, and let characters kind of tell the story as you're doing that, I think it will improve drastically. As I said, I disagree, but I agree at the same time. She makes some incredibly valid points, and some that I think I do disagree with.
Agree with me?
But
so if you go
totally
into
subjective.
it expecting something closer to Genshin Impact, Wuwa, I'm even giving Genshin Impact a lot of, like, I think Genshin Impact, Wuwa, HSR, if you're expecting something closer to that is a little bit more of a game, absolutely, you're going to be disappointed by this.
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
This is a gacha
That's
game.
fair.
It's a gacha game for gacha motherfuckers.
Many fair points made there. I agree with a lot of them, disagree with some of them. Not on a fundamental basis, though, just maybe from an intention standpoint, and obviously a subjective standpoint as well. Because at the end of the day, it's all just about our opinions. And most of us are fucking degenerates. We play these games. We sit on the internet streaming waifus and trying to pull fucking characters in games that I must admit, just a few years ago, I said were fucking dog shit and I'd never touch them. And here I am every day playing fucking games, trying to pull waifus and falling further and further into degeneracy.